Welcome and good morning to the Local Governance Reform announcement. With me this morning is Minister Alain, who is the Minister of Local Governance and Local Government Reform, and Deputy Minister Ryan Donaghy. Minister Alain will make a statement, and then both him and Ryan will be available for questions from reporters. Bonjour, bienvenue.
Good morning, and welcome to the announcement. This morning, we have the Minister of Local Governments and Local Governance Reform, and Ryan Donaghy, the Minister. And Ryan will then answer the questions from journalists.
To tell people why we're here. And we're here for the next generation. And this is why we're moving today with this bold reform, this robust reform. Il y a 5 premiers ministres dans...
There were 5 previous premiers who have influenced me, and I certainly want to thank Nouveau-Brunswick for having given us the social equity program.
And they have definitely influenced what I'm going to be saying today. Mr. McKenna, who indicated we need to have a clear message for New Brunswickers. Bernard Lord, who talked about when every New Brunswick will be strong, when every region is strong. So we talk a lot about regions today. I learned about David Allward, about consultations and the importance of consulting people and talking to people. And Premier Blaine Higgs, where he always asks us the question, how can we do better? So again, today, that's why we're moving forward. And merci spécial aussi à tous les Nouveau-Brunswickois.
And a special thank you to all New Brunswickers who have been working on the file. I can give some names, but I just want to give a special mention to Jean-Guy Finn, who has helped us throughout the process, and everybody else, every consultant who's helped us. I'm very pleased this morning to unveil our white paper and plan for local governance reform. After more than a year of consultation and hard work, we have reached an important moment for the overall development of the municipal community in our province.
And finally, to be here to unveil the plan we have been working tirelessly on since I was sworn in as Minister of Local Government and Local Governance Reform in September 2020. From the moment I stepped into this role, the purpose of this endeavor was clear. It was time to modernize our local governance system. It was stuck in the past, and our province has changed so much since the 1960s. Change is long overdue in our province, and I am not the only one saying it. Avec une population...
We have a population similar to Nova Scotia's, though we currently have 5 times the number of local entities. Many municipalities do not have the financial capacity and means to maintain good services and infrastructure over the long term. 30% of New Brunswickers are not represented at the local level by a mayor and council.
New Brunswick aren't thriving. They're barely hanging on. They're losing people to larger areas where there are more opportunities. They're losing services and economic growth potential. A lot has happened in the past few months, but the principle that guided us throughout they remain constant. We are upholding the principles of equal opportunity for fairness and equity throughout the province. As well, we want to make sure that we're efficient and accountable to New Brunswickers. Local governance capacity will be strengthened through the increased collaboration and cooperation.
We recognize the importance of community identity and the values of the Official Languages Act in our province, the only officially bilingual province in Canada. We have made sure to respect the linguistic balance in certain communities and regions to allow for the full development of the official language minority, the Acadian and Francophone community.
Respected, including their language, culture, sense of place in history while reducing the number of local governance entities. This includes respecting the importance principle established in the Act recognizing equality of the two official linguistic communities in New Brunswick. We have hit many milestones along the way, including our vibrant NB website launched in January, the release of our green paper in April, and a What We've Heard document in September. I was inspired to see so many people participate in our 36 public engagement sessions, submit their thoughts and ideas in writing to us, and completing our online survey. Many of the excellent ideas brought forward have been incorporated in the plan that we are releasing today. The white paper is our government's plan. It is our reform plan. It officially sets us the road to vibrant local communities, cooperating regionally, and have a province where we can live, work, and call a home for generations to come. New Brunswickers have been clear that they want to be brought forward by the province, and that's what we intend to do, and it's long overdue. We are going to have a sustainable regional approach that focus your priorities for economic, tourism, community development. We know that a one-size-fits-all will not work. Flexibility has been built into the regional delivery approach to ensure we support and expand on what is working and fill the gaps where those exist. It is also apparent in our discussions with New Brunswickers that the one-size-fits-all approach is not a sustainable option for our province. Je comprends.
I understand that change is not always easy, which is why this reform process will not happen overnight. Throughout the implementation process, you have and will continue to have the full support of the department. We will have transition teams in place to guide your community leaders and local governance, and also to ensure that any questions or concerns are addressed. This reform focuses on the strategic restructuring across the province, which will result in a reduction in the number of individual local entities from 340 to 90.
In 12 rural districts. These entities will have more financial and personal capacity to offer good services and to maintain and build our new infrastructure, whether recreational, sports, cultural, health, or other. En ce qui est tout important.
Just as importantly, every New Brunswicker will have a say in their local representation. In developing our restructuring plans, we took a close look at communities of interest where people work, meet, participate in recreational activities, and go to school. We looked at natural boundaries, such as rivers, urban and rural realities, and we also looked at language profiles. We considered whether the communities have a current cost-sharing agreement on some services and whether they have expressed a willingness to restructure.
I am most proud of is this was a collaborative process. We considered restructuring ideas that were brought forward during the extensive public engagement process, and I particularly want to thank all of those who wrote us ideas and how the region could look as a result of this process. Many of these ideas are reflected in this plan, be it the two new entities, one on the north side of the city of Fredericton, or the entity that encompasses the communities of Irishtown and Lakeville in my riding. There were just a couple of concepts that were brought to us by New Brunswickers during this consultation process. While local government structure may look different going forward, to ensure its viability over the long term, your community remains the place where your family calls home. I, for one, will always be a Louisville boy, even if it's been part of the city of Moncton since 1973. L'une des anciens villages.
One of the oldest Acadian villages in our province will retain its identity. The people of Cocagne will be able to continue to say, if Cocagne wants to, Cocagne can. And Cocagne will be even stronger by being under the same municipal structure as the neighboring Acadian communities of Grande-Digue, Notre-Dame, and Shediac Bridge. These communities share a common history, language, and culture, and are waterfront communities. With respect to land use planning, we will develop public interest statements to provide guidance on specific planning issues such as agricultural land use, natural resource development, settlement patterns, and climate change. We want to keep rural.
Sure that we keep rural. Les déclarations d'intérêt.
Public interest statements have been in the making for 40 years, and we look forward to working with planners in our province to make this happen.
Want property tax reform. That's why we'll be moving forward with this pillar in 2 phases. Our reform will provide local governments in phase 1 more flexibility to set non-local, non-residential, or business property tax rates. This is a long-called financial tool that St. John has led the way in calling for this flexibility. With the restructuring of existing local governance entities, we will maintain different tax rates, and any increase and decrease in tax rates will be determined during the transition period, which will be phased. People will pay for services they receive, and they will not pay for the services they do not receive. We know there will be more to do on the financial system. That's why we are committed in undertaking that work in phase 2. Once the local governance system is structured and the regional collaboration initiatives are well underway. Some options that will be considered are reducing the provincial property tax rate, revisiting the cost of roads in rural districts and the former local service districts, reviewing additional revenue generation opportunities. Nous savons que des améliorations.
We know that long-term improvements are needed in policing, which is why the Department of Public Safety will be focusing on this issue in the coming months.
Our volunteer firefighters and local government representatives who made it clear that while there is room to promote greater collaboration, this is not the time for regionalization. Again, I want to reiterate, this process will not happen overnight. The program from Equal Opportunity started in 1962 and finished in 1967. It was historic, but it took 5 years. This plan will take 4 years. As a department, we will work hand in hand with our communities in the implementation of the restructuring plan. The white paper, released today, will be followed by the legislative amendments to be introduced in the legislature in December. We will be putting a transition team in place to help guide the process by January 2022. Work on restructuring will begin early January, with special local elections and by-elections taking place where required in November of 2022. The newly restructured local governments and rural districts will be formally established January 1st, 2023. In the case of newly created local governments, the transition team will oversee the hiring of clerks and chief executive officers who will be in place by September 1st, 2022. Before I take questions from the media, I want you to take a moment to acknowledge the dedication of some very important people. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank all the incredible staff at our department and throughout government. We put together a reform team, which will become the transition team. They worked tirelessly with the larger departmental team who have been central to this process. Your hard work and commitment and dedication to the reform have made it possible to get this at this point today. They went above and beyond, and I thank them sincerely. Je vous remercie sincèrement. I also want to thank the stakeholders and many community leaders who took the time to meet with me and share their ideas. And to all New Brunswickers who participated in this process, this is your reform, a reform for the next generation. This is a testament to collaboration and partnerships, and those will be the keys to our success as we move together on the successful implementation of this local government reform plan for all New Brunswickers. You're probably asking, what's going to change? Well, there will be better and more consistent services. Il y aura certainement de
There will be better infrastructure.
all the areas of New Brunswick. Il y aura du développement économique.
There will be economic growth and collaboration throughout the province.
Democratic deficit that currently affects 30% of our population. Your voices will be heard. Again, this reform is about our future, et c'est certainement pour la prochaine génération.
It is for our next generation that we're doing this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Je maintenant invite les membres de les médias à poser.
I'm now inviting journalists to ask their questions. Everybody will have one question. You can ask your question in the language of your choice.
One question. Questions can be posed in the language of your choice. Today we'll start with Nathan DeLong, Miramichi Leader.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Hello, Nathan.
Hello, can you hear me okay, Minister?
Yes, I can, sir.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I asked your Deputy Minister, Mr. Donaghy, about this on the technical briefing, but I thought it would be good to get you to speak to it. I'm curious, I guess, about how local planning and land use planning services factored into this process. Throughout the governance reform process, Minister Alain, you have often mentioned land use planning as one of the key pillars. Of course, it's been touched on today. What are some of the problems you noticed with the current framework while you were working on the reforms?
Well, I think, starting as a counselor in Dieppe for 5 years, planning is definitely something which is really important and exemplifies and shows what we're all about. And that's why planning, for me, is probably one of the most, or not even probably the most important point here right now. As we all know, the province of New Brunswick, probably only 50% of it is planned, maybe even between 40 and 50%, which is planned. So we have to move forward on statements of provincial interest. And what these statements of provincial interest say, let's take, for example, farming, forestry, the fishery. We've been exploiting these resources for the past 200 years. We want to make sure that we want to exploit them in a more environmentally friendly way. We'll have to make sure that we consult with our First Nations also, but we want to do it for the next 200 years. So let's make sure that we have a plan. It'll also show, having statements of provincial interest will demonstrate to our kids what we value, but will also demonstrate to New Brunswickers and to people from outside New Brunswick what we value also. As the Deputy Minister alluded to earlier today, is that in my riding, for example, we have urban practices we have crept up in rural New Brunswick, and that's not right. There's urban practices that should be in urban settings, and there's definitely more practices that should be in rural New Brunswick. So that's why it's so important to move forward on planning, and that's why it's our objective by 2027 to make sure that 100% of New Brunswick is properly planned. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Shane McGee, CBC.
Hi, Minister. You've repeatedly said leading up to today that you would reduce the entities, but you wouldn't force people to do anything they don't want to do. You're now announcing annexations, amalgamations, or merging communities. What's changed?
Really, nothing. I think I've been consistent in my messaging. People have been asking for change. I think that's the difference. People across New Brunswick realize that we live in an antiquated structure. We've been living in a structure since the 1960s. And I think this consultation process showed us that people have ideas. And we receive over, I would say, 200 emails. We've received briefs from numerous cities, towns, villages, and rural districts to make sure that they wanted to be part of this reform process. And we're human also. So to make those generational decisions, we need to be pushed a little bit. So that's why we're moving today with a robust restructuring for New Brunswick. It's important that we do it. We want to make sure that we have viable communities. And we're doing it basically for three reasons. Number one is that we have services, quality services in our municipalities, not for the next 5 years, but the next 10, 20 years. As we know, we're trying to avert a crisis. There are some challenges with la main-d'oeuvre, with labor right now, as we see. So by grouping these, having these restructurings, it's going to give these municipalities capacity. So we want to keep services. Number two, we want to make sure that we keep our infrastructures that we have. We have great infrastructure, and there's great infrastructure projects on the horizon. So we're building capacity there too. And the last reason why we're doing this is for economic development reasons. We have a great opportunity to sell New Brunswick. We have great opportunities to make sure that a business can settle in our province. And these new municipalities, these new entities, our rural districts will have definitely the tools to move forward on these on this file.
Next, we'll go to Jacques Patra, CBC.
Hi, Minister. I'm sure you're anticipating that in particular places, perhaps an LSD that's being added to a village or a couple of villages, will be contesting the decisions in here. We'll ask you to be flexible. We'll ask you not to do it. They'll contact their MLAs who will probably pass on those concerns. So how flexible is this? Is this cast in stone, or is there wiggle room on? And I'm talking about how each of these communities and portions of LSDs are being grouped together into these entities.
I can say it's a great question, actually. Look, guys, we have to move forward on this reform. And yes, there are going to be some questions. However, with the consultation process that we did in the last year, the 36 public engagement sessions, our plan is what people were saying, and hence the reason why we're here today. There is no big surprises on some of the entities that are proposed here today, and I hope that we can move forward in discussions. And I hope if there's some questions, comments, I will be there in the communities to answer those questions also. It's important that we realize that if we don't do this heavy lifting today, the decisions will be given to the next generation. And we have to stop doing that. Hence the reason why we need to move forward on this reform. And that's why I can't, in the next 2 weeks, I'll be tabling it at the Legislative Assembly, and we can work the kinks out of what's the white paper today. But it's so important that we move forward by the end of the year so we can start the ground running in January of 2022.
Thank you, Jacques. Pascal Rachnog, Radio-Canada.
Pascal Vachnol, Radio-Canada. Hello, Pascal.
Mr. Jakes.
Yes. given the relatively small population in some areas of the province, and for instance here in Eastern Restigouche, why keep so many entities plus a regional service commission? Isn't that still too much bureaucracy? Why don't you do what you just called the heavy lifting all at once and have a single municipal decision-making, taxing, and administrative body for these areas, maybe with a ward system?
Well, as you know, the Regional Service Commission model has been there for 8 years. It definitely brings collaboration. There's two things that people have been saying to us. It's number one, it was the first time that the mayors, that councils would talk to each other from different communities. That's number one. And two, there's such good collaboration that we are confident that this is going to be a positive impact, and we're confident that people are going to work together more than ever. Because that's the reason why we have regional service commissions. There are some municipalities that will continue to exist, and that's why they're a part of not a new layer of government. This is not a new layer of government. However, it's a place where they can collaborate, discuss, and definitely with the new responsibilities of economic development, tourism, and regional transportation, these are major files that throughout New Brunswick we've been talking about for the last 20, 25 years. And now we're going to give responsibility, we're going to give life to those files.
Thank you, Tim. Vicky Hogarth, CHCO TV.
Thank you. Minister Alain, will an LSD have a say into what community they are amalgamated into, especially if they're sort of in between two towns? And what's the likelihood that their taxes will go up considerably, considering most of them are not paying for services that they might currently tap into right now?
Thank you for the question. I think a lot of LSDs have sent us letters, briefs, emails indicating where they want to go. Hence, during the public consultations that we held last September, October, was specifically for that. So there's no big surprise where they are today. And I think those representatives, and in collaboration with the department, are moving forward with the 78 entities in 12 rural districts today. Regarding taxation, there is a mechanism that we want to make sure that variable tax rates exist. I always use the example of Homarwaska, where in 2017 there was 4 villages and 4 LSDs that merged. Today they still have different tax rates and different services. So I think people will be taxed on the services they receive. They will not be taxed on services they will not be received. So the 2 points on taxation, 4.1 and 4.2, whereas the phase-in impacts and the differential tax rates should, if people understand it right, and that's my job in the next coming months, that the taxes will not go up. Thank you.
Vicky, Adam Jerez, Brunswick News.
Thanks, Minister. I just want to follow, excuse me, a little bit more on that line of questioning. New Brunswickers are probably now asking what this is going to cost them. You keep contending that residents will only pay for the services they receive. Can you walk people through what that actually means? And then in the technical briefing, we did hear that if some residents aren't paying enough for local governments or say recreation, they will see an increase. So when does that set in and who decides it?
Well, again, people receive services. So as any kind of municipal government, you dictate or you decide which services you want to give your citizens, and you tax them accordingly. And I think once the LSDs, the former LSDs, will be part of a new entity, they'll decide which type of services. We'll have that discussion during the transition process, and they'll be taxed accordingly. And if a region, a former LSD, are just satisfied with the services they receive today, well, they'll be taxed accordingly. And that's our objectives. Will there be minor tweaks on recreational services or some service agreements between new municipalities and existing municipalities? that will definitely happen also. So I think right now we have a white paper with new entities. The transition is going to be very important. Again, that we talk about what services they want to receive. And moving forward, I think New Brunswickers will definitely have the ability to provide new services or stay with the same services they receive today. So should be all good.
Thank you, Adam. Next, we'll move to Emma McPhee, Brunswick News.
Minister Alain, the City of St. John has been repeatedly promised sweeping changes to property tax by 2022. Yet the white paper today does not address things such as setting different tax classes for things like maybe industry versus commercial, nor does it address the question on the exemption of heavy equipment. Will these be addressed going forward? And if so, by what year can we expect that?
So thank you for that question. And we have to realize this reform process is over 4 years. In the Fint report, and academia have been very, very succinct in this, that we have to do the reforms first, the restructurings, for example, and the regional collaborations, and the pillars that on taxation, land use planning come after. So that's really in the Fint report, and academia has always been consistent on that, and we've been consistent that those changes need to happen first. We've elaborated phase 1 and phase 2. So to your points, that those questions you've been asked, we will be moving forward in phase 2, which is start the discussion in 23-24. It's a plan, it's movable, but we need to make sure that the restructurings and regional collaboration pieces are set in first, and then we work on the plan. This plan is not overnight. This is, again, a process that we'll be embarking on, and we hope to have collaboration with the municipal associations, with existing people, our transition team, and all of New Brunswickers too, because we want to make sure that we get it right. And having those discussions. And the last year has permitted us also to see what New Brunswickers really want to talk about. And I think we're taking care of it in our white paper.
Emma. Au prochain, Alexandre Boudreau, Acadie Nouvelle.
Hello, Minister. You talked about the democratic deficit, but it doesn't seem that your new rural districts will not have any decisional power. They will just be like regional services commissions. So do you think that this new model fixes the democratic deficit for the 8% of the population that will stay there? That's a good question, but this is an evolution, and the evolution exists at different levels in different structures. Today, 100% of New Brunswickers for the 2026 election will be able to vote for a representative. This is key. We must eliminate the 30% of democratic deficit. People living in the rural districts will be able to vote in 2022 during the special election for a representative for the rural districts. So it is important for them to have this ability. The people who live in rural areas tell us that they don't have access to the same information, that they are not as organized, so we will organize them. The evolution of rural districts is new, and there are other with rural districts, we're starting from scratch, and this is evolution, and we will re-evaluate the positions. So the 8% of New Brunswickers will have an elected official, and I will be working with my department. And as the Deputy Minister told you earlier today, we will be working with the municipality associations to see how we can change things and improve the structure. So if I understand correctly, you're not sure of putting this in place? Will you change it? No, we will be going through with the new commission in 2024. All right, thanks.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, Bruce.
Yes, thank you. As you know, Minister, the Mayor of Sackville wrote a strongly worded letter to you last July, vigorously opposing any amalgamation of Sackville with the surrounding areas and with Dorchester, which is what you're proposing, and proposed a regional model instead, more along the lines of the county council system in Nova Scotia. What do you have to say to local people here who will, likely be strongly opposed to this combining of Sackville with Dorchester and the surrounding LSDs? What was the thinking that went into that?
Yeah, Bruce, I don't think I've met actually the mayor since that letter in July. I think I've talked to him at least 6 or 7 times. I actually had a meeting at the city hall in Sackville with the mayor of Memramcook, the mayor of Port Elgin, the mayor of Dorchester, and the mayor of Sackville. And we talked at length of the different scenarios that could happen. So, yes, people had some of their ideas or their position at the start of the consultation process, but it evolved. And that's what people have to realize. We've had a great public consultation process. People had their say. We were talking different scenarios at different times. And I think today, the position of the town of Sackville would have evolved. I would hope so, because we had great discussions. And I believe in the people in Tantramar. Geez, we had a great discussion that day. And the collaboration that I've seen in the Tantramar, Memramcook area was to no end. So I hope to continue this. This is for the next generation. We have 4 mayors that are really collaborating. So let's move forward on this collaboration and let's make sure we make it happen.
Thank you. If I'm not wrong, the Finn report suggested really amalgamating Port Elgin, Sackville, Dorchester, the whole area. You've chosen to create 2 entities, 39 and 40. Why did you go that route?
Well, it's we have to make sure that cities, municipalities, the rural districts have capacity. And it's making sure that capacity, we had a slew of criterias that we looked at: high school catchment area, natural boundaries, rivers, our transportation system, the linguistic profile. So we took all these criteria, which are set and indicated in the white paper, and I think this is Memramcook, for example, did some heavy lifting in 1995. They had a big restructuring back in 1995. So hence the reason why we talked with Port Elgin to see what are the options there, and the Sackville, Dorchester area at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Erica Butler, CHMA.
Hi there.
Hi, Erica.
I guess I have a question. Hi. I have a question regarding, I guess, the elections that will be happening in November. As Bruce mentioned, Sackville and Dorchester will be under one entity, along with the surrounding areas. I noticed also that the town CAOs and clerks will be in place before the elections happen. So I'm wondering, on the transition teams, I guess I have a 2-tiered question here. Will there be local representation on those transition teams to determine who the staff are? And I guess I'm wondering why that is happening before the elections happen. And I'm also wondering if these elections will allow for district representation, or how will that work? Will we change the model? Right now we have no districts, only general elected people, but that poses the situation where Sackville will dominate the entire area here politically.
I'm going to So there's a lot of questions there, but the transition team will have both people from the department and people from their localities. It's really important that we have that. This is a collaborative process. And so yeah, I'll let Ryan, my deputy minister, take that technical question.
Sure, thanks for the question. So the transition teams that are going to be in place will form an advisory committee with the elected representation that is there today, as well as community leaders or LSD representatives. At the end of the day, a person needs to be in place by January 1st, 2023 to welcome that new council. And that's the reason why the staffing contingent will be in place by that time, but it will be done collaboratively locally. The power or the ability will be at the transition leader level.
And I'm confident that also we've been doing restructurings for the past 30 years now. This is not the first time. So when we look at Edmundston, Miramichi, but we saw Perth, Andover, Florenceville, Bristol. In 73, they did. But in past 30 years, we've done a lot of Homodawaska, Beaubassin, so there is a checklist at local government, and we're ready to help them and have these local committees to work on this process.
And what about changes to how elections will work?
Sure, I'll speak to that as well. So as part of that transition, there will be a process to look at the council composition. So how many should there be, as well as what the ward structure or at-large structure should be. We fully anticipate that most of the, almost all of the new entities will go with a ward structure to ensure that there's some representation to the new areas that are being brought together. So that will be worked on locally during the transition process in the first part of 2022.
We'll next go to Natalie Sturgeon, Global News.
Hi there. You know, you lessened the number of local service districts to 12. I know some of them have been amalgamated with municipalities, but there are some municipalities that fell below the threshold that you provided was the criteria, but also there are municipalities that are basically separated by a line in the pavement that weren't amalgamated. Why did the local service districts bear the brunt of this, and why did you not make a stronger move on municipalities?
Well, I think I can't. There's some criteria. There's some municipalities that don't hit their criteria, but they're so close. So it's 4,000 population and 200 million in assessment. This is about viability. This is about capacity. You have the village of Beldin, which has 1,800 people and $344 million in assessment. They are viable. However, there are some communities that have maybe that assessment, but not that population, which are not viable. They do not have that infrastructure or the capacity to grow. And our objective is to make sure that the services they receive today are there in 10, 20 years from now. There is a worker shortage all over the world. And if we don't make these changes today, this is a call to make sure we want to avert a crisis in municipal governments. So hence the reason why we're moving forward with this reform. And the entities that we're provided today have that possibility to make sure that we move forward on capacity and they can provide the services to the level we expect today.
Thank you, Natalie. Next, we'll move to Laura Brown.
Hi, Minister. Following up on Natalie's question, actually, going through the list, and Shane McGee actually asked this earlier, there are some units or some villages that are not merging, where that formula really speaks to that they should. So I'm looking at Fredericton Junction and Tracy, which are just 6 kilometers away from each other, but they're not merging. But then you've got Minto and Shipman merging, and they're 27 kilometers away from each other and have a much bigger population. So I'm wondering if you were told flatly from some communities, just no, we're not doing this. And did you listen to that?
So I'll take that question. What we looked at was capacity. So if bringing two local governments together wasn't going to achieve that, those local governments in the future will have to look at whether they remain as they are, whether they combine with a larger area. We don't expect this to be static for decades. No system is. There will be a process for those areas to look at their future, either joining the rural district or combining. In the areas where the community of interest made sense and the other criteria that we were looking at, that's where we were bringing those together. So there are different reasons why communities came together across the province, and it's not one size fits all.
That's the importance that different situations happen in different areas, and there's not a one size fits all. And some were definitely ready to collaborate more than others. That's normal. We're human. It's totally normal. But there is a serious capacity issue in New Brunswick for the municipalities that have not attained those thresholds. And to Ryan's point, we will be working with them and making sure that we have a better process for them to move forward on looking differently maybe in the future.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Savannah Awad, Telegraph Journal.
Hi there. My question is for the minister. Your white paper had indicated a consensus around provincial property taxation on non-owner occupied residential and non-residential properties, that it should be reduced or eliminated. Can you talk about why that wasn't addressed in these reforms?
Well, there's a two-pronged process. Number one, as academia and in previous reports I've indicated, we have to work on restructuring and the regional collaboration piece first. We are moving forward on taxation in two phases. And on phase two, as you've been saying, the provincial rate, a reduction, we're going to be definitely working on it. There is a lot of work we have to do with finance and services Brunswick. I think of late, we have been definitely talking about assessments and the way we categorize different properties and different. So we have a lot of work to do there with Department of Finance and Services Brunswick. They realize that. We have definitely views also a social license on reducing the provincial tax rates. We have different opinions and comments. We have to make sure that tenants are taken care of also. How do we move forward with good social housing? So those are all questions that we'll look at the next couple of years, 2 years, 3 years, and we'll definitely, but it's something in the white paper that in phase two, we have to look at and we have to make sure that the government of New Brunswick makes a decision on that exact file.
Next, we'll go to Judy Desalliers, CGPN.
Judy? Alex Villeneuve, Radio-Canada. Hello. What do you say to residents of current LSDs who are fearing of seeing their taxes go up? Like I said earlier, New Brunswickers who live in rural areas do not need to worry. In the fourth pillar, which is with the items 4.1 and 4.2, those should eliminate their fears about taxation. 4.1 is to make sure that with the new entities, variable tax rates will exist, and if we need to make changes to taxation, there will be a phasing of the taxation where we will be phasing the taxation over 2-3 years. Thank you. We almost didn't have any questions in French, so I insist. How are you going to make sure that changing the names of the communities do not divide the communities? We will be working on that with the transition teams and people locally. Toponymy is important. We heard Daniel Leblanc, Bernard Richard, and the National Assembly of Acadie have sent their briefs. This will help us work on names and with their regional collaboration, local collaboration, we will do that, and it is very important. People in Toronto want to know where their lobster was caught. This is important for people, but for toponymy, we will be working with the transition team to make sure that there's a process and that everybody agrees on the name for the region. Simon Delattre, Acadie Nouvelle. Hello, Minister. I believe the question was asked in English. How will this restructuration be final? Should there be some opposition from mayors or from citizens from LSDs? Should there be lots of opposition? Can you confirm that the plan will be final, that these new entities will be implemented no matter what? Great question, Simon. Simon, we've been talking about this for 25 years. Local governance reform, we had over 25 studies, associations, the Association of Francophone Municipalities, the Union of Municipalities, the Cities of New Brunswick, the Association of the LSDs, all told us that we needed a reform and that we needed to move forward. So this is no surprise. It's so important for us to move forward. This reform is overdue, and if we don't go forward with it, this will impact negatively the next generation, people who want to live here, and this is why we will be working with the opposition. We will be introducing bills in December at the legislature, and I hope that by the end of the year we will be able to work together with transition teams as soon as January 2022. Like I said, the consultation process was comprehensive. People were consulted, so today is no surprise. We will certainly be working with the new entities to go ahead. Samuel Gauzin-Bélanger, TVA. Samuel.
Jay.
Hi, Brad.
Okay, and then our last reporter for today, Catherine Morrison, Kings County Record. Okay, hearing nothing, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and that concludes our local governance reform announcement. Merci, et voilà la main de la finie à notre annonce sur la réforme de la gouvernance locale d'aujourd'hui.